You're in the show business. Everyone can see and hear you.
Okay, welcome to Rosa Flora Growers Limited. Thanks for joining us today. This is very exciting for us. First time we're doing something like this. My name is Arielle DeBoer. I'm an owner of Rosa Flora along with my husband, Ralph DeBoer, who's holding the phone right now. We are not professionals at videoing, so bear with us if we lose you here and there, but we'll jump right back in as soon as possible. So just to start out, my name is Arielle. My parents started Rosa Flora Growers in 1978. They immigrated from the Netherlands. My dad grew up on a rose farm, and so they started out with roses as well. Fast forward to today, we grow gerbera, snapdragons, lisianthus, standard and mini gerbera. So maybe what I'll start with is our mission, and then I'll cut over to Ralph, and Ralph can take his introduction over. Rosa Flora Limited is devoted to the glory of God in growing fresh cut flowers of the highest quality and ensuring the utmost level of satisfaction for our customers, attainable with the teamwork of our dedicated staff. So, and that is my main duty. I mostly focus on HR and marketing. And I'm going to pass it over to Ralph, and he's going to tell you what he does.
So hi there, folks. Thanks for joining us today. My name, as Arielle said, is Ralph DeBoer. Arielle and I are married, and we are the owners of Rosa Flora Growers. Again, we are a fresh cut flower growing operation. We have about 45 acres of greenhouses where we grow 4 main varieties of cut flowers. So that's pretty exciting. For some people, and I'm not sure who's all watching, but for some people, it's hard to understand maybe how much 45 acres is. So to give you a picture of that, or a view of that, or an example, a soccer field or a football field is about 1 acre. So if you can imagine 45 soccer fields or 45 football fields full of cut flowers, that's kind of what we've got here. So we're excited that you joined us today. We're going to take you on a little bit of a tour of our greenhouses. As you can probably imagine, it's hard to cover 45 acres or 45 soccer fields of flowers, but we're going to show you, a snapshot of some of that. So you're going to see lots of beauty, lots of color, and hopefully it shows up well on your screen. And we're going to try to do a little bit of a walk around and maybe even a little bit of a bike around today on our bikes to try to cover a lot of ground to show you all about our flower farm.
So if I'm going to pause right there, one of the first questions came in and they're asking, what is a greenhouse?
What is a greenhouse? Should we walk out to the greenhouse and show them?
Sure, let's do that.
Let's do that. So the question is, what is a greenhouse? We're now entering our barn, one of our barn areas. So the greenhouse is actually, this is an example of about a 5-acre greenhouse, what we call plant 1. And we will walk in there in a moment. While we're in our barn area, you can see a wide range of some of our large gerbera flowers. So this is an example of the flowers that come out of the greenhouse that get harvested and get prepared for selling. So there you can see them going through one of our machines, and we insert the gerberas into a card, and then they get sleeved, and then they get actually put into a pail of water so that they stay fresh for our customers. So back to the first question, what is a greenhouse? Here we go. So ta-da, here we are. This is a greenhouse. This is again plant 1. This covers about 5 acres of large gerbera production. And this greenhouse was built brand new in 2016. So as we define a greenhouse, and some people define greenhouses slightly differently, our greenhouses are made of an acrylic product at the top that allows the light to come into the greenhouse. So what's important about growing into a greenhouse is that you're allowed to allow the natural sunlight come in. Because it is an enclosed structure, we're able to control some of the growth that happens in the greenhouse by changing the amount of heat, the amount of light, the amount of water, the amount of nutrients that the plants get. So that's the really neat and the really important part of growing in a greenhouse that's different than growing outside. As greenhouse growers, we're able to control a lot of the variables and the elements that these flowers need to grow really well. So today, for example, it's nice and warm out. The sun is shining. We like that. It's probably about 27 degrees Celsius here, maybe about 80% relative to humidity. We've watered our plants. We're giving them carbon dioxide to help them breathe.
Maybe show the carbon dioxide.
Yeah, we've got the carbon dioxide. Yeah, it's hard to see. But if we maybe dig right down into here, and if you shine that right down into there, Arielle, you can see a little pipe at the bottom there, a little tube. Oh, it's hard to see. Right there. That's the carbon dioxide line. And we introduce a little bit of carbon dioxide to help these flowers grow. So again, what is a greenhouse? This is our greenhouse structure. 30 feet wide, about 20 feet high. Allows the sunlight to come in. We control the temperature, control the watering, control the carbon dioxide, control the nutrients.
How do flowers get their nutrients from the soil?
How do flowers get the nutrients from the soil? That's the next question. Okay, great question. Actually, we grow, technically, it looks like soil, but it's not really soil. Interestingly, and it might be hard to see here, but interestingly, we grow in what we call a substrate called cocoa. And if you zoom back out, I'll explain cocoa a little bit. What we call cocoa is actually, it's the husk or the shell of a coconut that's harvested in countries like primarily Sri Lanka and India, where they don't use the outside of the cocoa nut. So we use the shell, it gets ground up, and we grow our plants in cocoa substrate. So how do the plants get the nutrients from that? There's actually not too many nutrients in that cocoa. Initially there are, but once they get used up, the cocoa really just acts somewhat like a house, if you will, a place for the roots to live, and we add all the water and the nutrients in the water. So if the plants need calcium or magnesium or phosphates, we add those into the water, so they become water-soluble fertilizers, is what we call them. The fertilizer or the nutrients are in the water, and we water each plant. And again, it might be hard to see. We'll try to find it. Each plant has a little dripper in it. And it's hard to see because these plants are so thick. But I will show you, yeah, here. I will show you the lines here. Here's an irrigation line, the white line, and each of these little, what we call spaghettis, come off there, and they have little drippers that go into the individual pots. So that's how the plants get their nutrients.
Good.
Yeah.
No new questions.
No new questions. So maybe we'll just walk down the aisle a little bit. These are, again, large gerbera plants. The nice thing about gerberas is they come in lots of different colors. So we've got oranges and reds and yellows and whites and pinks and purples. And we grow literally acres of large gerbera. And certain times of the year, certain customers want different colors. So we're able to offer our customers hopefully as many color options as they're looking for.
Question, what are some of the names of the flowers?
Okay, what are some of the names of the flowers?
Here's one, Spotlight.
Spotlight, yeah. So we've got all kinds of names. So to partially answer that question, just picking up a clipboard here, one of the things that we do here is keep an eye on the production of each of the flowers. They are named. So for example, we've got Fahrenheit, Soulmate, Club Soda, Piano. Now Piano happens to be a white one with, say, a black center, hence the name. Mint, what kind of color do you think mint might be? Estate, Cafe, Full Moon. Well, here's one, Limoncello. What color might Limoncello be? It's a yellow one. Sun Valley, Wake Up, Tess, Sunstone, for example. Those are all names of varieties that we have.
There's about 100 varieties of gerbera. That's all I wanted to say. And I think someone might be interested in learning about IPM.
IPM.
Right? Maybe
Okay.
you want to talk about that. That's your
Sure.
thing.
IPM is an acronym or a little term that we have in the greenhouse industry. It stands for Integrated Pest Management. So one of the things that we've tried to do as greenhouse growers over the years is try not to use pesticides to control some of the insects, especially that damage our flowers. So we've developed a system, we and other growers around the world have developed systems of bringing in what we call positive biologicals, or good bugs, to eat the bad bugs. So in our Gerber crop here, it's hard to see because many of these insects are very tiny, but what we try to do is introduce a good bug that gets hungry and eats a bad bug so that they don't damage our crop. So one interesting thing that I can see here, if you zoom in on the leaf here, Arielle, so this is a Gerber leaf, and that little spot there, that's actually damage from a little critter that we call a leaf miner. And they call it a leaf miner because this little insect actually gets into the leaf and crawls around and eats its way into the leaf. And there's not a lot of leaf miner here. I can tell by looking that the leaf miner is under control because that's just a wee bit of damage. But we've got positive or good bugs that will actually come and try to eat the bad bugs. So that's called IPM, or integrated pest management. So that's kind of an interesting thing we do. We try to keep this whole greenhouse in balance with a certain amount of bad bugs and a certain amount of good bugs. And on that note, a lot of people ask, well, don't you want to get rid of all the bad bugs? Well, actually, we do want to keep a little bit of the bad bugs just so that the good bugs still have something to eat. So we try to keep a healthy balance between good and bad, not too many good bugs so they have nothing to eat, but not too many bad bugs so that they damage the crop. Oh, yeah. So here's a little bottle called Spidex Vital, and it's this is a bottle of good bugs that come in here, and we actually we shake them loose, and they come in a little bit of a media there, and they come in. Yeah, they got a little bit of food when they come here, and we introduce these into the greenhouse, and in this case, this bug is called Persimmilus, and there was, believe it or not, 10,000 Persimmilus in this bottle, and we introduced that into the greenhouse, and the little Persimmilus go around and eat bad bugs. So that's how that works.
Another great question: how do you plant all of your flowers and take care of them?
Yeah,
that's a really good question.
Big question.
That is the main thing that we do here.
Yeah, maybe
aside from selling
the flowers.
Walk
a little further, we'll see some of the empty pots. So yeah, how do we plant them? How do we take care of them? Good question. In this case, Gerber plants, and we'll walk nice and swiftly here. Gerber plants, these plants last about 3 years. So we will keep each of these plants in our greenhouse for about 3 years. So every 3 years, we rotate a certain percentage of our crop, usually 1/3. So we change an even amount each year. So as we walk, I know we're going to see a house up here that's being changed. So what we do is we literally dry the plants down, and when the plants dry down, they will die, and at the end of 3 years, and then we take them out of the greenhouse. We get a new pot, and we get some new cocoa. There's the example of the dripper I couldn't find earlier. So this house, if you look at this house, you'll see that we are preparing this house for some new plants that are going to be coming here actually in just a few weeks. And you can see a good example of what the cocoa looks like. Actually, it's a good so this is what the cocoa looks like. It's a coconut husk. So ground up. If you look at this carefully, I can break it up a bit. If I squeeze it, you see there's water in there. And if I break it up, you can imagine that this was actually the shell of a coconut, believe it or not. And we've got the pots filled with that, and the plants will start rooting in the coconut, and this makes a nice home for the roots. And then again, we introduce the water through the dripper, and the nutrients and water come in through the dripper and fill up the pot, and then the roots are able to take in the water and nutrients and live. Awesome. Here's is there another question? Yeah, another question. How often do you water your plants? Oh, good question. Great question. How often? Yeah, it depends a lot on the time of year. Because it's spring and summertime now, we water these plants several times a day, actually. So because, again, we're growing in a greenhouse, we have the opportunity to rotate the watering. So, for example, and I don't know today, but I'm going to guess, say, for example, if we watered them 4 times a day, you might start at 6 a.m. and then 8 a.m. and then maybe 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. You might water them 3, 4, 5 times a day with a couple of hours in between. And what is the average height of a daisy? Okay. So maybe when they go out to market, maybe. Yeah. So the nicest. Here's a good example. So this is a red large Gerber called Dynamic. So that's this guy. And I'm just going to move my hand down to where the where the stem gets into the heart of the plant. So you can see to the end of my fingers, up to almost the top of my arm. This is a good flower. It's got about a 10 centimeter diameter, and it's at least 60 centimeters in length. So 50 to 60 centimeters is a good length for us.
Great. Another great question. Where do you get your water from? I'm glad someone thought of that. I thought you might not even think that deeply.
Okay.
It's a big issue for us.
Yeah, great question. Where do we get the water? And I'm trying to see the best. It's hard to see here, but if you can zoom in on the gutter, Arielle.
Yeah.
So you might be hard to pick up, but I'm going to point up towards the gutter there. At the center where the two slopes of the greenhouse come together, there's a large aluminum piece called a gutter, similar to the gutter on maybe the edge of your house where your rainwater falls. Yeah, your eaves trough, like an eaves trough. There's a gutter there. So when it rains, if we get some rainfall, we catch it on our greenhouse roof. It runs to the gutter, and then the gutter has a slight slope on it, and it runs to the end of the greenhouse. And at the end of the greenhouse, there's a 4-inch PVC or plastic pipe that drops. And below the ground, when we build our greenhouses, we put together a system of pipes that get larger and larger and larger because they're collecting more and more water. And then those pipes actually go to the back of our farm where we have a large freshwater pond. So every time it rains, we're able to catch the rainwater from, in this case, say 5 acres of this greenhouse, and it all gets directed towards a freshwater pond. From that freshwater pond, it fills up, 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 especially in the times of the year where we get more rain. And then in the summer where it might be a little bit drier, our pond goes down, down, down a little bit. And interestingly, in southern Ontario here, we can catch enough rainwater on our greenhouse roofs to supply our greenhouses with water almost all of the year in a normal year. One of the other interesting ways that we can do that is because of this.
Oh, yes.
If you can maybe zoom in there.
Sure,
Arielle.
yeah.
This is, and it doesn't look like much, but this is an example, and maybe you can see it. There's a little bit of water running off what we call a drain or a return gutter.
So I'll kind of pan along for a sec so
Yeah.
you can see it. See, underneath the gerbera, there's a bit of a gutter underneath that to catch the leftover water. So any excess water from there hits the gutter, and then Ralph, I'm sure you want to explain the rest.
Yeah. So when we water the plants, say for example today, if we were to water 1 liter of water per plant, I'm just making up an example. If we gave the plant 1 liter of water today, it wouldn't probably use all of that water. So in fact, a plant might only use about 50% of the water that you give it. So knowing that and understanding that, we say we don't want to waste that water, and especially that fertilizer that's in that water from that plant that it doesn't use. So we've got a drip gutter, that gutter underneath of all of the plants that actually collect that water again, direct it to the side of the pathway here, and that water percolates through gravel into a tile, and actually we collect all of that return water, and we pump that return water to a separate pond, what we call a return pond, that fills up with return water and fertilizer. And then we can take that water and reuse it. So why is that important? That's important because if we didn't do that, we'd be wasting a lot of fresh water, and we'd be wasting a lot of nutrients. And we'd have to collect a lot more fresh water to water all of our plants. So about 50% of the water that we're using today is return water that the plants maybe didn't take yesterday, for example. So that's a pretty neat thing about growing in greenhouses. We have the ability to control the climate in terms of temperature and light, humidity, CO2, but we also have the ability to control the watering and also collect the water that we don't use and bring it back into our system again. So that's pretty cool. Any other questions?
Do you pot all the plants by hand? Great question.
Yeah. No, we actually have what we call a potting machine. So it's a basic, it's a fairly basic machine. We have a mixer that mixes up our cocoa, and then the mixer discharges the cocoa onto a conveyor belt, which has the potting machine has a hopper, and the cocoa goes from the hopper into the pots, and then they come off the belts, and then we put them in by hand. So this is the examples that you're seeing here now where the plants aren't there. They're basically we're ready to plant these up, and the plants will come in, and then we will literally take a small plant,
about maybe 10 centimeters tall, and we will just insert it into the pot here, like this. And then eventually the roots from that plant will make their way into the rest of the cocoa, and it'll start to grow. And when it starts to grow, it makes more leaves, and probably from the time that we plant a new gerbera, in likely 5, 6, 7 weeks from that, you'll see the first bud start. And if you didn't notice earlier, one of the neat things about a gerbera plant is you can see new buds coming up all the time. So you see this little guy there? That's a new bud that probably started less than a week ago. And here's the one that's a little bigger.
And there's one that's even smaller yet.
Yeah.
Underneath the hand there.
Yeah.
Someone asked a really great question about the education you need to run a greenhouse. Great question.
Good question.
Yeah.
The education to run a greenhouse. Yeah, you need to know a lot of things about, lots of different topics. To be a grower in the greenhouse, it's really good to understand and like plants, of course. And to do that, an education in science is often good. So things like biology and chemistry, math are really good. So if you really like science and you like to work with plants and you want to understand how plants grow, a degree in science is good. And if you specify in certain sciences and get a horticultural degree, that's a type of scientific degree that specializes in plant growth.
And you can get a nice a 2-year program in Niagara College, for example, in Hort with even a co-op.
Yeah.
So the best kind of education is hands-on when it comes to a greenhouse.
Yeah. So myself, I have a background in chemistry, chemical engineering technology. So I look after a lot of the production and the operations. And Arielle, again, who's holding the camera, why don't you tell us about your education and how that helps you do your job?
Well, I grew up in the greenhouse business, but my education is not mostly in Hort. But I think the hands-on learning is the best part, and having a lot of common sense and ability. There's some entrepreneurship that is involved with running any business, right? So there's the grower and there's the growing aspect of the business. There's also the business management aspects of the business, and those are all relevant and important. So even a business degree is helpful, or business courses are helpful in order to run a business well, right? And so there's many different parts to making a business run well. Oops. There's many different parts to making a business run well, and you might be gifted in some areas and less gifted in others, but that's where you hire people to help you in the areas that you are weak and lead with your strengths, which is why I have Ralph mostly on the other side of the camera here. So another question came through, which is, do you have pollinators in the greenhouse? You guys are asking such great questions.
Yeah, pollinators. Actually, in this case, in gerbera production, we do not need pollinators in the greenhouse. We do have bees and other insects that will come in, but we don't need pollinators to pollinate gerbera per se in this type of production. There are many greenhouse growers, for example, people who grow maybe cucumbers or tomatoes or peppers. There are many plants that do require pollination within the greenhouse, and that will happen many times by bringing the pollinators into the greenhouse. And again, once that's done, a greenhouse is nice in that you provide everything that the pollinator also needs. So they've got food, they've got a nice climate, and they've got flowers to pollinate. So the pollinators are happy there. But in this particular crop, no, we do not need pollinators. So we'll keep walking and talking?
Yeah, I think it might be nice to check out the gerbera bunching machine, parting machine. We have about 5 minutes left, so it's not a lot of time.
Okay. Any more questions as we're walking and talking?
I'll pan the greenhouse.
One of the interesting things that if normally you would see, if I'm not sure how well it shows up on the camera, but this time of year we have so much heat and so much sunlight that we do have acrylic that is what we call diffuse. So it's got a special coating on it that actually breaks up the light and keeps the light from being too intense for the plants. And in addition to that, we can apply a product on our greenhouse that puts a little bit of a chalky white film. And in fact, it is just like chalk. It's what we call whitewash on top of our greenhouse. And what that does in the very hot, bright months of the year, May, June, July, August, it keeps some of that extra light that we don't want into the greenhouse out, and it keeps the greenhouse a little cooler.
So Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say one of the other things we didn't speak to yet, and you've probably seen, is the lights. So interestingly, yeah, this time of year, again, we've got lots of light, natural light in the greenhouse. But in months like October, November, December, January, there's 4 or 5 months of the year where the plants actually don't have as much light as they might want. So what we're able to do is supplement the lack of natural light with grow lights. So in this crop of gerbera, for example, likes to have, say, 600 par of light. That's just a number that we would say. So that's the light intensity. So they want a certain light intensity of, say, 600 par. In addition to that, each plant might want a certain day length. And with gerbera likes about a 12-hour day length. So sometimes in the year, in the summer, our day might be more than 12 hours. So we can actually close a curtain in the greenhouse and artificially shorten the day for the gerbera. And in the winter, especially in December, when our days get really short, like 8 hours, we can turn on our grow lights to give us a 12-hour day, to give optimal conditions for the plant. And what that does is allow us to increase our quality. The quality of the flowers becomes really good, and the production becomes really good because those plants are getting the exact day length and the exact light intensity that they want.
Good question. What flower is mostly grown in Rosa Flora greenhouses? Maybe you can break it down for us. How much of each?
Yeah, good question. So this is plant one. This is large gerbera. Large gerbera is defined by the size of the head, which is 10 centimeters or more. So that's about 5 acres here. Next to us is another 5 acres of mini gerbera, very similar to large gerbera, but a smaller head, say 6-7 centimeters. So that's about 5 acres. In addition to that, plant 3 has about 10 acres of large gerbera. So that's this side of the road, say the west side of our operation. The west side of our farm is about 20 acres or so of gerbera. On the east side of the road, which we won't get to see today, we've got another about 25 acres of greenhouse. Half of that is a flower called a lisianthus, and that's a rose-like flower without the thorns. Beautiful flower as well. So that's about half of the other side of the road, and the other half is snapdragons. So in summary, we've got about 4 main crops: mini gerbera, large gerbera, lisianthus, and snapdragons. About 45 acres.
What are the best tips for us to grow flowers at home? Get a greenhouse.
Yeah. It's certainly, as a greenhouse grower, it's always nice to be able to be in control of your crop as much as you can. So at home, even if you can control the amount of water, controlling the main variables of what this plant wants. So if you're able to control the light, the heat, the water, the nutrients, and the soil that it's growing in, those are sort of 5 main drivers to good production. So if you can do that at home, the same way we try to do that in our greenhouse, you'll be successful.
And I think we can just take a quick peek here behind the carding machine to see the finished product. These are our gerberas, nearly ready to ship, right? They're all carded, 10 beautiful flowers on a card. And they've got our name and logo on it, and a little code that tells us where they got carded and some other information. And then this machine takes it down to the end of the line, and then someone sleeves it and then puts it in a pail of water, treated water. And I see that we are at our time. I'm waiting for the next cue then for what's next. Thank you very much for joining us today. Maybe we'll do this. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks again.